welcome to the first of what will be a series eventually of skills building presentations and practices about the awareness of and facility with the feeling body, the emotional body. Our ability to discern and have the ability to consciously choose to express ourselves through our emotions and feelings in a good way, rather than being at the effect of them. And all this fits into the Living Resilience Deep Academy work, which you'll remember starts with the notion that what got us into this predicament, this global predicament that we're all in our very personal individual lives, all the way out to the global, what got us into this predicament that we're in is that we've disconnected from the primary sources of meaning and relationship in human life. Pretty bold assertion. If you've gone through a couple of the introductory video series, you got an idea of why we say that. And you'll also, if you went through the resilience series, you start to get a sense of some of the resilience skills at each of the levels of awareness that we can build. We can build skills and expand our capacity to be resilient and present as the level of stressors occur at a larger and larger level in our lives. And this work, this basic feeling body work, is starts to show up about midway in the range of stages of awareness, meaning that before that, it's mostly first aid level resilient skills. And you can remember those are just physical sensation, breath, what keeps us in our body, conscious in our body at the most basic level. And again, first aid level resilient skills. So if you get up to the mid-range of those resilient skills and of those stages of awareness, we hopefully will have more space and more and clarity of intention about building a skill set that would be of more use and bring us to a greater level of facility with these important aspects of ourselves, like our emotions, like our feelings, and how aware can I become of what has me be triggered when I'm triggered, what has me feel more connected with people, less connected with people, and oftentimes those things are involved with the emotions or the feeling body. So you also may have been in contact one way or another with our idea of having practices of reconnection, that if what got us here into these predicaments that we're facing is our disconnection from deeper self, other people, earth, and soul, what we're asserting is that no matter what we're desiring to do in our lives with the time we've got, and with, no matter where we are in terms of facing those predicaments, we're likely to be well served by choosing and engaging with our own set of practices of reconnection. So those show up in a couple of different ways, and there are actually many different kinds of practices, and you'll find out that in other videos. The main distinction I'd like to remind us of here is that the first and easily most popular kind of practices that we see, across the world, is the more contemplative practices. Though they could be considered a more a more self-regulating practice, a soothing practice, something to calm us down after we've been knocked off center and often into a more anxious or anxiety-prone state. So that where these would be the calming practices, the contemplative practices. Meditation is often the center of that kind of practice. What I want to mention is that this particular practice and these distinctions about the feelings and emotions tend to be both kinds of practice, that the contemplative, the soothing, the self-regulating, and also they tend to involve the more activating, the other end of the spectrum, the practices that will stir us up, will, if we have been knocked off of center into a more depressed or suppressed energy state, then what will serve us oftentimes is a more activating practice. A person I have great respect for in this world is a man named Andrew Harvey, who's a mystic and a sacred activist, and just a remarkable scholar of the wisdom traditions throughout the history of humanity. And he has made this distinction, calling these two types of practices warming practices and cooling practices. What I'm trying to distinguish now for us is the warming practices, and that we will be actually going from your preparation in watching this video is meant to be just a preparation for the actual practice itself, which we're going to do in our next time together. What you'll encounter is activating practices, the activating side of the emotions and feelings type of practices. There's a very important piece of this idea of practices of reconnection, and especially in terms of the activating practices. It can actually show up as an issue in the cooling or soothing or self-regulating practices, but is more likely to show up in the activating practices. And that is what has now come to be called a trauma awareness. You know, just 5 years ago, this was barely a fledgling topic in public conversation. Now, trauma awareness in terms of organizational structures, healthcare delivery, education delivery, and so on, there's just a remarkable amount more awareness of how trauma is really a part of all of our lives to some degree or another. And of course, there are some people who have had what are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, that can have really an imprinting on their system. And in terms of a residual amount of that trauma can start to build up for a person. And that residual trauma in a person's system can be reactivated, can be inflamed again in unusual ways, unexpected ways oftentimes. So I would ask that you, even whether you've had a traumatic history or not, a history of traumatic experience or not, I'd ask that you have a certain amount of sensitivity to your experience. So we'll be doing some very activating activities when it comes time to do the practice after this video. What I'm asking you to do is to be fully responsible for your experience. You always, in any of the practices that we offer in this work of Deep Academy and Community of Practice, you always have the senior vote in terms of your own participation. So I'd ask that you keep an eye out for where it is not just a benign activation, but you can start to sense a discomfort, something actually showing up in your experience in an unexpected way that is in any way unpleasant. That's not supposed to be happening. That's not what we're asking for here. That's not what we're intending or pointing you toward. What we are inviting is a feeling of more aliveness and an engagement of, and a conscious engagement of our emotions one at a time in a conscious way so that we can gain more facility, more acuity with regard to our own emotional state. So if you're feeling that any sort of discomfort, anything's not quite adding up and it's in any way uncomfortable, I would request of you to allow yourself to step back, to not participate, to shift your participation until the end of the act, whatever the activity is, and we can possibly find another way to adapt the practice that we're doing to something that is more accessible for you and more comfortable for you. So please keep yourself aware of that, and keep us posted when we're doing our practices together, because again, we're doing this together, and it is not meant to be something that further disturbs you in any way or reactivates or re-traumatizes you. And that's a shorthand way of talking about trauma awareness in our what promise to be very challenging, oftentimes challenging practices of reconnection, especially in the activating practices. So let's step into the actual material that will hopefully prepare you for this practicing a basic skill set with becoming more aware of our emotions and feelings, and expanding our ability to consciously call up those emotions as they can serve us in a situation rather than being something out of our control and random. So first, let's talk about the difference between feelings and emotions. And I'm going to be telling you about really reading from the playbook, if you will, from a body of work from some trainers that I have a wonderful amount of relationship with and history with and appreciation for. And they're all over the world, but primarily over in Europe, a few of them here in the States, quite a few in Australia. And they're from an organization called Possibility Management. And their central focus, one of the really entrees into their work, is to dive deep into this particular focus of the feelings and emotions body. And so I'm going to work with, just lay out for you some of their distinctions about that. So let's start with emotions. What are emotions? They would say that these are feelings that are rooted in the past. They can last for hours, days, weeks, months, maybe a lifetime, depending on how hard we're holding on to them. These are inauthentic feelings from others, or can be. It can be things that we actually get on us or get into our system that are sourced from someone else. It can be from organizations or impactful environments that we're in, for instance, like our own family, church, school, the nation that we're in. One way or another, these can show up as incomplete feelings from our past. So what started out as feelings authentic in the moment, for some reason or another, lodged in our system, resided in our system, and the remnants of that can be called emotions. So starting with the four core feelings, which we're going to talk about more in a minute, but just briefly, they're anger, fear, sadness, and joy. We can see the emotions version of any of these by seeing if any of the emotions criteria above fit for the feeling we're experiencing in the moment. In other words, if you've been feeling this anger for a few days now, you're pissed at your spouse or your boss at work, and if it's lasted longer than a few minutes, chances are we're talking about an emotion. And remember, it's things that are often rooted in the past can be an influence from others and so on. For the vast majority of industrialized business as usual culture around the world, the emotions or feelings we have come to normalize in daily life are very likely to be what we are calling here emotions. It is actually, unfortunately, rare that a person is primarily feeling their feelings as they would define them. We'll get to that in just a moment, how they define feelings. Could be said that all of the other nuanced names for feelings and emotions are combinations of the four primary feelings: anger, fear, sadness, and joy. We'll be focusing on these combinations in later learning series about the feeling body. When we get to the live practices of this training, we'll have numerous opportunities to muster and express each core feeling, discern when more than one feeling is present, and learn more about the combinations of primary feelings that make up other familiar emotions. Feelings are rooted in the present. They last for just a few minutes. They arise, are used with gratitude, and then depart. So again, the four core feelings: anger, fear, sadness, and joy. These are, of course, there are nuanced dozens, if not hundreds, of other names for emotions or feelings that we could dive into. But what the folks at Possibility Management have come up with is a way to discern, to distinguish between these core feelings, and that facility with being able to call forth the energy of each one on its own is a wonderful and clear foundation for us to become better and better, more skilled at consciously invoking a given a given emotion or particularly feeling in the moment to be of service to us. I'd like to add one more element, which isn't quite a feeling, but it sure has earned its place in the list, because it is something that we quite possibly are more aware of than any of the other feelings. And that is the experience of numbness. So if perhaps you'll recall from the introductory work here in Living Resilience Deep Academy, you've been hearing the concept of override, that is actually one of the collective superpowers of the global business as usual culture, particularly in the high-powered, privileged environments like the USA. We have learned to become masterful at override, and that experience in our body is actually a numbness. It's something that we have to activate in our system in order to not feel what our body so wants to feel in the moment. It would be a painful mistake to leave numbness out of this important learning series, Introduction to Feelings. Numbness is a key coping mechanism that we all turn to regularly. It's our hope that in the Deep Academy work, we all will have less need for this overdeveloped coping mechanism and far more access to full, authentic expression of our core feelings on a daily basis. Getting back to the numbness, it's one way we can talk about numbness is as if it's a bar. We can speak about, if we raise the bar, if we raise the amount of numbness, it could be that we're in a situation that is calling forth uncomfortable emotions we don't want to feel right now. So if we raise the bar, the numbness bar, we will be feeling those uncomfortable feelings less. We spend enormous amounts of energy not feeling our feelings. Feelings are painful. We learn to numb, to override, assuring that we do not register that pain. The global business as usual culture has trained us to normalize an immense amount of pain. That same culture incentivizes those who endure and override that pain the best. Between now and our practice session together, please take a few moments to consider these next coming sentences as writing prompts. Is not feeling our feelings creating depression, addiction, adding to our sense of hopelessness, meaninglessness? You can choose to dial down your numbness, allowing yourself to become vulnerable, perceptive, relational, and responsive. How do you numb? Would you choose to wake up your feelings if you could? The price of more consciousness includes experiencing more discomfort or pain. The more you are aware of, both within you and around you, the more pain you will feel. As you learn to navigate your feelings and live in the understanding that pain is just anger, sadness, fear, or joy, you can learn to use your feelings to create, to connect, and to move out of hopelessness into an alive space from which to be in the world. Here's a simple scanning exercise that it would be useful to practice, perhaps daily, between now and when we actually do the live practice together. Many of us take on this practice really for life. We end up using this practice as a part of our check-ins when we sit in circle with other people here in the community of practice and elsewhere. So it's called a feelings check-in, and it's meant to be no more than about a minute. And so it could easily be just a part of your check-in whenever you're sitting in circle. The idea is to briefly scan or have scanned your system before you're even sitting down in circle. Or if it's coming on your time, you can just briefly scan yourself. Begin to assess how much of each of the four cornerstone feelings are you feeling, or have you recently been feeling? And so what percentage of your overall capacity for that feeling have you been feeling either right now or have been feeling in the past few days that you'd like to share with the group? So for instance, if I do that right now, if I include a very brief feelings check-in, and I'm telling the group, I'm checking in with you, and I'm letting you know what my experience of when I scan my body, what percentage of each of the cornerstone emotions, cornerstone feelings I've been feeling, and what percentage of the maximum amount I could possibly feel of each one that I've been feeling. So if I look into the past couple of days, then I'd like to check in with you about it. I can say that in terms of anger, I have been feeling somewhere in the vicinity of 40 to 50% of my capacity to feel and experience anger. With regard to fear, I've experienced somewhere in the range of 20 to 30% of my capacity to feel fear. With joy, I have experienced upwards of 60 to 70% of my capacity to feel joy. And actually, it's not fair to say that, because there's actually a low end there through some of the other events in those past couple of days. I've also experienced a low in joy of about 10%. from time to time in these past few days. And the final cornerstone feeling being sadness, I can say that I have experienced a range from about 10% at the low end to upwards of 80% of sadness and grief in the past couple of days. So that's a quick exercise that you can now take on to use daily, use whenever you check in with a group for whom that kind of check-in is appropriate. Please bring that along when we get to the actual practice time together coming up soon. And really thank you for engaging in these kind of mid-level practices where we're engaging these important aspects of our bodies, all the different aspects of ourselves that tend to be off center by just our engagement with the business as usual world in these crazy times. And this type of practice that will be coming from these distinctions, this information, plus of course, the actual practicing of them. These are the kind of practices that can expand our capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors instead of being knocked off center so easily or being triggered so easily and having less awareness than is healthy to have of our emotional body, of our feeling body. So we look forward to seeing you in the live practice session, and all the best to you as you walk this path.